Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom.
Hey folks, welcome back to the show. Very excited and grateful for my guest today. His name is Shaun McAfee. We were just getting acquainted. This is the first conversation we've ever had. We're going to talk about faith and social media and how the two of these play together, which we often know they don't always so easily play together, do they, Shaun?
No, absolutely not.
So, I mean, this is, and we'll get into your story and your history as we move along. But I wanted to let you know that this is a very salient topic for me because I just put up something on social media. As we know, the Catholic Church is going through some difficult times, to say the least, right now, and it has made it very difficult. I mean, evangelization has always been difficult on social media because you have so many different viewpoints. You often get a lot of hostility, and then you have the kind of scandals that have been layered on top and made the efforts even more difficult. So, I'm trying to break through that. I'm trying to do my best to spread the good news and to be a good evangelist. But boy, Shaun, could I have used a book like yours, like way long ago? So I'm just going to throw that out there. I don't know if we want to get into the specifics of my post or not, but I'm just curious, what is the 10,000-foot view here, Shaun, and what inspired you to undertake this project of how you can sort of effectively evangelize or spread the word through social media?
Sure. Thanks for asking. Yeah. So the magisterium is obviously very diverse on any subject, whether it's baptism, you can baptize adults, baptize infants, baptize teenagers, and I didn't know this until recently. Actually, I was asked to go into my priest. We just had a newborn and I was asked to go into my priest's office.
Congratulations.
For baptism. Thank you very much. It's our fourth. So you'd think I'd know the answer to this next kind of riddle here. He said, get the book that has the rite of baptism in it. So I grabbed the RCIA book that has all the rites for RCIA in it. And he said, wrong one, Shaun. And I was a little embarrassed. I was like, okay, which one was I supposed to grab? This has the rite of baptism in it. It's all your bookmarks and notes in it. Yep. He said, that's baptism for adults. I need the baptism for children. And so the magisterium is diverse, and it's especially diverse on media because there's so much media formats. There's modes, there's mediums, and there's content, and there's messages. And so the church has a lot to say about what we create, how we create it, the spirit that we do it in, the purpose of it, the morality behind it, and the intention and the circumstances that you should be doing all of this with. And so I wanted to study this whenever I was getting a degree from Holy Apostles College and Seminary. Mm-hmm. I wanted to combine my dogmatic theology concentration in ecumenism, which is the unity of the church, and I wanted to bridge that to something current that I was involved in, which is media. And so I wrote a thesis on the connection between social media, or the new media particularly, and ecumenism, and how we can bridge that gap, and how the church tells us we can use the media to encourage unity within the church. And from there, after I graduated, it really became a 3-year, that was back in 2015, it became a 3-year project to kind of chip away at this manuscript and finally come up with something I thought was, I guess, palatable to current bloggers, current podcasters, anybody who has children who, they're wondering if they should get them a Facebook account or stay up too late playing Fortnite,
Yep.
I want to help people like that out there, because these are things that I had to learn over the last 3 years or discover or learn through mistakes. So I wanted to share my failures, my successes, and also some of what the church teaches in order to help parents and scholars and really anybody out there who wants to consume media the right way.
Well, this is something I'm deeply interested in because, a little bit about myself. I not only have the Catholic radio show, but I'm in a very otherwise secular realm of fitness and entrepreneurship and self-improvement. And, on my podcast, I host the Sunday school segment where I kind of take a mere Christianity approach. And I'm Catholic. There's, no question about that. So ecumenism is very interesting, but also, just tactics and strategies for effective presentation, has something that I've spent a lot of time studying, that I try constantly to get better at, to be as gracious, but yet as enticing as possible in dialogue. So Shaun, you're the expert in here, so you lead the conversation. You see somebody like in my position, or even just a lot of Catholics in general, who, they want to evangelize, but they don't feel like they know how, or they have the tools, or they're worried about, the barrage of criticism or objections that people are going to raise. How do you even start to broach this subject? Like, where does this conversation even begin?
I don't know. I think it begins different for everybody, to be honest, Pat.
Mm-hmm.
It really starts with probably a reset button for most of us. And maybe sometimes we need to hit that multiple times. Coaches always tell their players after, maybe a crushing defeat, they say, okay, let's go back to the basics and let's start. I always think of Gordon Bombay, and the Mighty Ducks, using eggs on the ice. I'm not saying everybody needs to go to the local ice rink and use eggs and, wax on, wax off and this kind of thing. But I think it is important for us all to kind of realize that we're not professionals. Even if there are, those of us who enjoy a good social media presence, it's easy to create blunders.
Mm-hmm.
The church says that the media is a gift from God. Well, that's great, but it also says in the very next sentence of Miranda Prosis that it also may be used to her own loss. And I think too often we use the media to our own loss. I think if anybody really, is doubting themselves or really wants to get started in the media and just doesn't know where, I think really what they need to do is, I'm not going to say read my book, but they really do need to start to try to discover exactly what the church says about evangelization, period.
Mm-hmm.
I think the best document for that is Evangelii Nuntiandi, which was put out quite a while ago. I believe it was Pope Paul VI. And John Paul II, I believe, and it's a great encyclical. It's actually quite long, but it does talk about the three forms of evangelization, and I cover this in my book, and I relate it to social media. But so once somebody can kind of get their head wrapped around what the church says evangelization really is, and they want to use their social media presence or their new media presence in order to effectively evangelize, they probably need to just slow down, because the first thing you do is not go and make a blog and try to tell everybody what you think.
Mm-hmm.
What I would say is you probably need to go, like anybody, like kids starting out in school, they don't immediately become writers, they become readers. So we need to become good consumers of the right kind of programs and the right kind of podcasts and the right kind of books and the right kind of blogs, reputable sources of orthodoxy and faithfulship to the magisterium and to the faithful, period.
Yeah.
Then we can better, through that example, it's like they always say, you become a replication of your 5 closest friends. Well, your podcast is going to be a replication of the 5 podcasts you listen to, or your next book is going to be a replication. It's going to have the same tone and fervor and meaning and pace and style as the last 5 books you read. So if we can kind of go into social media in that sort of way and in that sort of tenor to research what the church says about it. And then let's see how modern, successful Catholics are doing it. Not just those with lots of Twitter followers, or that doesn't mean you're successful, but who are those who are truly reflecting what we just read that the church says you should do. And then from there, you can probably start moving on with your evangelistic voice.
Well, I like that recommendation, and it's one that's been true in my experience too. It's kind of like it's kind of the Benedict option, right? You kind of have to kind of steep yourself in an environment that is going to be supportive and inspiring of your efforts, rather than constantly being out in an environment that is actively hostile toward everything you believe, which I think can cause people to kind of hold up or feel very guarded and just and keep their faith a very private affair. Surround yourself with the people who are doing a good job and who are doing it right. And you'll not only get ideas from them, but that should, at least for me, Shaun, that's always been very inspiring to me as well, to see that there are other people out there and to try and study and analyze how are they doing it, because this obviously got across to me. It's getting across to other people, and then see if I can kind of present that in my own unique way. Is that something sort of what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say that, I kind of think of the people who had to be mavericks in history, Joan of Arc or Saint Teresa of Calcutta. These were people who, even after she died, Teresa of Calcutta, Mother Teresa, she was opposed by some atheist groups saying that, she mismanaged funds, or she really didn't take care of anybody if she wasn't letting them die. And, so yeah, even though we surround ourselves with like-minded people, there still will be resistance, and we do have to accept that. We do have to move on with the confidence and the prayer and the Holy Spirit that, we're doing things for the right intention, and we can only hope that we're obeying the Spirit.
And that's something I want to ask you, because, I am by nature a very confrontational person. I'm an apologist. I will go
come off that way.
I will go to the mat over any of this stuff. But I constantly have to try and remind myself it's not about winning arguments, right? It's about saving souls. Ultimately, it's about trying to spread the good news. So this is my struggle, Shaun, and I would love your opinion on this. Is, you see these objections or accusations, and then my response immediately, or YouTube videos about anything, and there's no shortage of stuff attacking Christianity and Catholicism out there on many different levels. It's all over the place. So the tendency, at least for me, is I just want to get into that mess and I want to debate full on. But I know that isn't always the most effective measure, because immediately defenses go up. People take sides right away. It doesn't even matter how good your arguments are at that point, because people have already made up their minds. So there is clearly a difference between having good arguments and being an effective evangelist. Now, I think that they can go together, but deeper considerations need to be made. And I say this speaking from experience, a lot of it mistaken experience, and trying to learn as I go. But does that make sense, what I'm describing?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a huge temptation not to go out and be right, but to defend the gospel. Whether it's apologetics or, there's a huge temptation to just go out there and get it done and jump in and address the things that you see that are problems. And those are valid concerns. Those are valid, those are valid reasons to get engaged. But what I think I've learned is especially in the area of apologetics, and I've written for Catholic Answers, I've written for EWTN, I've written for them all out there, and I've been engaged in it. I have not taken on like a debate like Tim Staples or Jim Yakin or anybody, and I don't think I ever will. But what I think I've realized is that it's probably smarter for most of us 90% of the time to hold our tongue, or in the case of media, to maybe hold our thumbs, or maybe if you're on your desktop, to hold your fingertips. And first sit back and pray, digest exactly what's going on, rather than kind of jumping in the pool when you see the tidal wave coming in, because it's the best tactic. You allow yourself to kind of get a breather rather than react. You allow yourself to kind of think about what exactly is the argument here, what's the best approach, rather than kind of jumping in and seeing things from only your angle. And, I hate saying this cliche, but, as they say, meet people where they are. Well, in apologetics, which is a facet of the effort to evangelize, there is a serious need to understand, okay, well, not just meeting somebody where they are, kind of like foo-foo, that's the pretty thing to say, but really there is some real substance in taking the time to understand, the circumstances and the context of what somebody is arguing before you go back and you say, yada, 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 you're wrong. Here's the truth. You either get it or you don't. I think in the meantime, we find that the slower causes to evangelization, to win people over time, are the ones that last the longest. I can't name a saint in history that had too many, lightning on the spot, immediate conversions. There was no grounds erupting, the smoke didn't come out of people's ears and people didn't really tremble. That stuff doesn't exist.
It's kind of like the myth of an overnight success, right? Well, you didn't see the past 20 years they were spending trying to become that overnight success.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so it's the same in evangelization. You might win somebody over with a couple reasons, for a few weeks or maybe even a couple years, but the kind of evangelization, the kind of apologetics that really lasts in somebody's heart and soul and mind is the kind that's taken, careful consideration over time, where you build friendships and relationships.
I have found that to be so true. And we all have our strengths and weaknesses. And I know it is a weakness of mine is that, some people will say, it's so great that you can go out and argue and debate with anybody. That's not always a good thing, right? Because what I have experienced is exactly what you're saying, Shaun. It's when you really form a relationship with somebody that a charitable and open dialogue can then develop in a way that, exchanging comments back and forth in the section of YouTube video just is not going to happen, right?
No. I mean, people aren't on YouTube to have their minds changed.
Mm-hmm. So I'm glad you brought that up because it really resonates with me.
Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean you don't need to say something, though.
Yeah, and so that's my next point. Is like at the same time, I just feel this obligation, this kind of burning obligation to at least, maybe I won't change that person's mind, but maybe I will somehow halt them from negatively influencing somebody else. Is there some merit to that line of thinking? Yeah,
what you have to do, I think the first thing you have to do is our number one job in apologetics is yes, it's to be convincing, but I think it really starts with planting seeds. And what are those seeds made of? It's not really seeds of knowledge or encouragement or, seeds of, great ideas. It's seeds of doubt. What you want to do is you want to plant seeds of doubt in order to reveal a larger truth. And that can come through confirming, a bias. That can come through confirming a poor philosophy, backing up and unraveling an argument. And then you can start speaking the truth and saying things, profound and bringing out your ideas. But it starts with, to me, I think it starts with planting seeds of doubt and unwinding the seeds of confusion that exist out there that all of us really suffer from in one area or another.
And one thing I will say, I guess, for anybody who's in the same situation as me is yes, very rarely do, if ever, that I can remember, and I've been in a lot of these exchanges, especially online, does the person I'm arguing against, immediately turn around and say, oh, you know what, you're right. When's the next baptism? That has never happened. But what will happen is I'll often get a lot of messages, specifically private messages, inquiring and asking more or saying, thank you, that clarified something. So I guess maybe it's also worth considering, especially since everything on social media is so public now, that it's not usually just a one-on-one exchange. There's usually some type of audience, and maybe you don't know where that audience falls. Maybe some people have already made up their mind, but maybe some people are kind of open-minded and might be able to be influenced one way or the other, right?
Yeah, you point to something that's so true, and that's that when we comment on YouTube and when we comment on Facebook and when we send a tweet out, we aren't just talking to one person. We are having an open dialogue that anybody can see as long as it exists on the internet. Mm-hmm. And you have to make sure that those words are carefully chosen, that you're keeping in mind the larger picture here, that you're opening a public forum that is going to touch many people. So that goes into all the decisions you have to make, about not being terse and being to the point and being reverent and being kind and making sure somebody doesn't find that one time that you lashed out at somebody. Because those are going to be things that kind of become bombs, and you want to not plant any bombs. You want to be able to defeat bombs, and you want to approach people with gentleness and reverence, like the Bible says. And so you point to a very good truth that is rarely probably thought of by many people.
I guess the one advantage I have, Shaun, is I learned a lot of these efforts. So I'm a revert to Catholicism after a long span of searching and confusion. But I've always been active online. My primary business is online. So I've always been engaged in evangelization of some sort, whether it's just trying to promote working out, right? Which inherently leads to a ton of debates and quarrels, not quite as contentious as religious as you might imagine, but you might be surprised how religious in mentality people get over these things. Perhaps you've seen it yourself. But, everything you describe, I've made all those mistakes, but I think thankfully I made most of them in my secular argumentation and learned enough from the failures of dropping those bombs, so to speak, that I did become, and maybe this is God's providence, working out the kinks before he tried to make me an evangelist, right? Wow. That by the time I became Catholic, I had already learned so much about what does and doesn't work in trying to, influence people in a positive way online. That said, I still mess up. I still have to take the time to think and select my words carefully. But everything that you're saying has been so true in my experience that it's just like, wow, I really wish I just would have talked to you like 15 years ago.
Oh, please. We all have these hurdles. And if you can get over the big ones, then it makes getting over the small ones, no matter how numerous they are. Maybe they're like ants, but maybe if you can get over the larger wolves, the larger wolf hurdles, it makes stepping over the ants a little easier. So yeah, we're all going to that same place, I think.
So let's take the opposite position. All right, somebody is, they're faithful. They want to evangelize. Maybe they're not contentious. Maybe they don't feel like getting into arguments. What are some ideas or strategies or approaches they can begin to either start spiritual conversations in an open and charitable way, or begin to form relationships online? Because I know people always want tactics. They always want to be told exactly what to do. Is that something that we can offer advice on, or are there some general guidelines that we can offer to people who are new to this but open to getting started?
I'm still working on perfecting this saying, but I'm trying to perfect this sentence, this statement, and that's that your digital pitchfork in the 21st century is the share, the like, the retweet, the follow, and those buttons. You get where I'm going?
Yeah, I do.
You don't need to be the one to argue everything. You can follow somebody who's been doing it for years, and you can support them, and you can share that with your friends. It reminds me of St. Francis de Sales. They say that he converted some 60,000 or 80,000 Genevans.
Mm-hmm.
He used to go around like Carl Keating and put these little pamphlet under people's doors at night with some apologetics track on them.
Mm-hmm.
And he's not, and he has anybody you ask about, well, what's the marks of St. Francis de Sales? Well, he was a fantastic apologist.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very true. But what is he the patron saint of? He's not the patron saint of apologists. He's a patron saint of the press, of publishing. And I think that that's because he was a wise user of not reinventing the wheel. He let the arguments that were proven and accepted and orthodox, he recreated those, and he put them into a small format, a small packageable format, and sent those to the people in his diocese. He didn't reinvent the wheel. He wasn't trying to say it a little better than St. Robert Bellarmine, or maybe be a little wiser than St. Gonzaga, or maybe be a better pastor than St. Borromeo. He took their words and redistributed them. So I think the digital pitchfork for most people who, and honestly, it needs to be most people, not everybody. I say this in the book. I say, I need to say this very clearly, something like that not everybody reading this book needs to be a blogger, because not everybody, it creates static. But what most people should do, and this is the way the kind of cookie crumbles anyways, is most people should use that digital pitchfork, is make a sign, make a banner of what somebody else has said, share, like, retweet, and so on, and don't reinvent the wheel.
That's a great reminder, and something that I found extremely useful for myself. Not only, it's because, okay, sometimes, maybe you do enjoy making the arguments yourself, but other times you're just tired, or maybe somebody else has already made the argument before, and they've done it in a really gracious way. And we can, and it's sort of field tested in a sense. Like if something's, going viral in a sense, we say, okay, this is clearly having an impact on people. Maybe I could help it have an even slightly bigger impact, and searching out for the types of content that has seemed to really resonate people from either various denominations, or maybe they're agnostic or atheistic, like that, is something that it is something that I try to do. And I think this ties into the point of you saying meet people where they're at, and maybe part of the strategy here is to kind of have a toolkit of various resources or references for kind of each person where they are. Like, okay, here's a Protestant, they're held up on this. Well, maybe this resource would be really good for them. Or here's an atheist, maybe they're held up on them. I don't know. I'm just tossing some ideas out here. So tell me if these are really bad ones, but it's kind of what
you're throwing things up on the wall and see what sticks. Yes. Everything's, what you're saying is making sense. If you're going to go out there and you're going to evangelize, what you need to do is you need, like we said at the beginning of the conversation, you see what others are doing. And you can either, join in a like movement, I think, without, trying to create novelty and find everybody's, I guess, every blogger, every podcaster kind of has to find a niche, but not a niche of a message. Our message should be unified. We should be talking about the same things. We should be discussing the same things. We should be defending the same people. I think that the church operates well when the entire engine is nice and oiled and fueled up and ready to go.
Yep.
So to speak, working in unison.
Yeah, man, it's not only an interesting conversation to me, but I think it's one that is becoming increasingly relevant. I think anybody of faith and belief kind of feels that, because we run into it all the time. We run into the constant criticism and objections, and we feel like we need to say something or get into the fray. So hopefully this is giving people some ideas of how they can, be effective about that. And we mentioned some things not to do, not trying to just let our emotions run ahead of us or leave bombs that are going to, allow people to kind of be like, oh, look at how that person acts. Like, that's not, that's the common one. Like that clearly, like, if that's what Christianity is, I want nothing to do with it. Right.
That's true.
So, I mean, maybe some other points of, things to avoid might be helpful with people. What are some things we want to watch out for, or some mistakes that we should be careful not to make when we go about this?
Yeah, there's so many blunders. And I definitely didn't list enough in my book, because I've even, thought of a few after it was published. But, what we want to make sure we avoid, I think, most of all, is using the media to our loss. Anything that's regarded as a loss to the church is regarded as a loss to all her members. The notion is particularly important to those who use the media as an outlet of political, moral, and ecclesial discussion. I think, what we want to avoid in using it as a loss is, we don't want to hurt the church.
Yeah.
We don't want to hurt the body of Christ. Whenever the interweb, it's so funny that we call the internet the web. It's not just that because of, the way it communicates, but it's also a web because of the way that it kind of, sticks us all in the same little plot. We're all kind of suspended in a cloud, but we're all really tied together in this little web. And so whenever one piece of that web is tugged, if you ever, maybe thrown something at a spider web, you notice the whole web kind of shakes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think it's the same way in the Catholic Church. One blogger on, let's say, Pathos, or however you say it,
mm-hmm.
They say something, it can really scandalize the rest of, the Catholic Church. So if I say something on the National Catholic Register and I didn't really think through it, and I called somebody out, and, I start this bickering, ongoing
mm-hmm.
war and debate between me and somebody else online for a number of weeks, that's an example of using it to your loss. And the deepest loss we can have with the Catholic Church is losing unity, not having one voice.
Yes.
The reason it was the prayer in the Garden of Gethsemane is because this is the one important thing, is that not just we may be one so that, it's a success and, so that it doesn't fall apart and let's all just hold hands and sing Kumbaya, but not being unified, breaks the family, it cripples the church, especially with the scandals going on right now. Somebody asked me about it the other day. I was walking to lunch with them and said, what do you think about what's going on? I said, it's awful, but the last thing I said to them was something along the lines of, you can't destroy the church, but you can doggone cripple it for a while, maybe for a few generations. And, I think there's little instances, where we can kind of recreate that, even though we're, not as important as the cardinals, in the big picture. We are important in the local picture, amongst our friends. So if we scandalize ourselves, scandalize other people, if we're not trying to, faithfully walk hand in hand as best as possible, it's not possible all the time, because you have to, expel people and shake off the dust, the dust from your sandals, as Jesus says every now
sure.
and then.
Mm-hmm.
But, if we're not walking hand in hand, then that web really does lose its power and lose its presence.
Yeah. And that's why, and this is something I've also found that is really helpful. And this is something that, Bishop Robert Barron says is, try to lead with the beauty and the goodness. Like, maybe don't lead with the doctrine of hell or something like that. Right. There's something, and of course it depends on meeting people where they're at. If that's somebody's, last objection, I'm sure, we have to address it and talk about, but, at least for me, I'm talking to a lot of people who are not Catholic or not Christian. A great many are sort of this spiritual but not religious. I'm sure you're familiar.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that has been very helpful advice to me. Is leading with the overwhelming amount of goodness and beauty inherent to the church and Christianity, and not that all other issues aren't important, but we can kind of pick and choose, which tools to kind of move ahead with. And I think that's something worth considering, because I think, and again, another mistake that I made is sometimes people will get caught up on one particular facet and always try to force that one into the conversation. And, that might not be, that might not be meeting somebody where they're at. So I don't know if that's another mistake that you highlight in your book, or how you would approach something like that.
Yeah. I think you said it perfectly. I think the biggest thing we have to do, I agree with, Bishop Barron's words. Every generation has to figure out, one way or another, what is the issue and how do we respond to it? I think, we chase the beauty, but, I live in Italy here, and if you go to most of the frescoes, they're showing off, very beautiful images, but the other half of them are pointing to Dante's Inferno.
Yep.
It wasn't just because it was a popular story. It's because it really capsulized, the turmoil that was going on with politics and morality and, corruption in the church. And, the many kinds of sins. And it highlighted this in such a visual way for people that it did scare them into heaven, and for other people, it might have made them stubborn and, gotten them a nice, seat in the seventh circle. But
sure. Yeah.
So there's so many ways to abuse the media. Here's another one is this section is titled "Not the Me Dia." And what I mean is, like, there's that me in team. They say there is no me in team. Well, yeah, actually there is a me. And what they mean is there's no I in team, but we all get the point, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think the first thing that most of us do whenever we kind of get into, podcasting or blogging or get a Twitter account is we see that little number of followers, or we get a blog and we see that view count.
Yes.
We put it on Facebook and we see the share count. We start to kind of measure ourselves by that metric alone.
Yep.
And that's certainly something that's important. I think back to Acts chapter 3, whenever in order to highlight the power of the Holy Spirit, they named the number of people that followed and were converted that day and accepted baptism for their families.
Mm-hmm.
You can multiply that number times maybe the average size of a family, because all it said was men. And we know that whenever something was counted back then, it was just the men. So when they said 3,000, and their families, it was probably a lot more than that. And they say that for a reason. So statistics are very important, but one thing you need to not do, or maybe one thing you need to recognize rather, is that the media is not the media. You always want to be pushing something out. We say reflecting the love of Christ or reflecting the light of Christ. And I think that's what we want to do with the media. Is we're not trying to, take that best selfie or, show off the makeup product we got or do what the rest of the world is doing.
Yeah.
We want to show off, like Robert Barron says, is we want to do something beautiful. And maybe sometimes beauty is controversial. Sure. So it doesn't mean that beautiful has to be something that everybody loves, but beauty can be something truthful. Beauty can be something controversial. Beauty can be something very wonderful. And maybe even, like the Renaissance people had this argument going back, maybe it can be a highlight about the beauty of proper sexuality online. So really we got to find that right niche and make sure that we're not just talking about it in an inward sense, but in an outward sense.
Yeah. What a good point too, is that beauty itself can be controversial, and the sexuality issue is of course, like, possibly right at the top of that list, right? Even just the notion of monogamy now is, I mean, oh goodness, we do live in an interesting time. I mean, I think we can certainly conclude that. I don't know if interesting, well, just like how beauty can be controversial, I don't know if interesting necessarily means good, but there's a lot of opportunities out there too, right?
Yeah. I as I walk around in these towns in Italy, sometimes I wonder, I could have gone back to, the 14th century and, blown a whistle. And now that I know the history books that are written, I know the right moves that were made and the right calculated, words that were said, I could probably run back and, be a MacGyver. Or what was that one show in the early 90s about the time traveler? It was Quantum Leap.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say that, or Highlander, but I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, Highlander was cool.
Yep.
But Quantum Leap, we always used to watch him do on Ziggy. And the guy with the cigar, and he would go back and solve something in order to prevent something from happening. Of course, that doesn't exist. And it's easy to go back and you can say, it would be exciting in a way to go back to the 14th century, the 15th century, in order to see, what was it like to live in such a time of engrossing scandal And now is a really ripe time to recognize the same kind of things. We think that maybe that happened then, and maybe it was worse, but maybe in a lot of ways it was the same. And a lot of people didn't get that wake up call, and it took a long time for people to get that wake up call. And we kind of see that in a romantic sense. I don't know about you, Pat, but I kind of see it in a romantic sense where I'm like, man, it'd be so cool to go and just kind of be a fly on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe even a person in the pew and pray and be a part of that. But that doesn't mean that was beautiful or it was interesting for sure. But that doesn't mean that it was, the classical current sense of beautiful, because it was hard work. It was probably, scandalous for some people in some towns to keep their Catholic faith, for sure. I mean, because they were persecuted after, the reformers basically outlawed Catholicism.
Yeah.
Or they took away, particular tax breaks or suppressed certain, denominations, for their involvement, or they didn't get the local accoutrements and entitlements. In the civic world. And so today, I think it's really interesting. It is certainly exciting. And I hope that many people kind of jump on the opportunity of getting involved, especially with having all of the history we have in the church and realizing, like I said, you can not destroy the church, but you can sure cripple her. And being a part of that, that time when the church is getting her legs blown out from under her, or at least one toe shot off, it is a little bit interesting, to think we're living in that time of controversy, because, that's, I guess that's really where the church earns its name and earns its beauty and earns its rights in a place in the world is whenever it survives things like this. What did the cardinal say? He said, that nobody can destroy the Catholic Church. It's tried too many times, to destroy itself. There's kind of like a truth in that.
I mean, it's not funny, like really funny, but it's kind of funny. You know what I mean? Like,
it points to a truth. It's a humor that points to a truth. That we live in a time where we're called to do something very special, and we need to, everybody needs to step up. Digital pitchforks.
I love everything that you just said. And to me, before I came Catholic and I was kind of considering and looking at Christianity, the study of history of the church was not only a great excursus into the utter depravity of man, but also the redemptive power of the Holy Spirit. And I was just, and like, as terrible as things have been and are right now, it's that study and seeing just how bad they have been before, and yet the prevailing power of the church that gives me hope and a sense of optimism now, and even an expectation for many great goods and fruits to come out of this. So I'm glad you brought that up, and I won't try to cover anything over it because I don't want to blemish your statement. It was really well made.
Thank you.
But Social Media Magisterium is a book, a no-nonsense guide to the proper use of media. And that just came out last month, right, Shaun? What's the best place for people to get that? And what's the best way for people to follow your work and stay in touch with you and all that?
Anybody that follows me, well, beware. No, I'm just kidding.
I go against everything in my book.
Exactly. No, I make mistakes sometimes too. I say things on Facebook, like you said something that said, I think I said something.
I'm actually going to send you a request right now, and then which
we're not friends already.
Yeah, I know. Which I should have done. Apologies. I should have done it before, and then we can maybe chat a little bit after, and you can give me a thorough critique if needed.
Cool. Look, so people can get my book on Amazon. It's with En Route Books and Media, and so it's on Amazon, and you can buy it in Kindle or paperback. If you prefer to go to Barnes & Noble, you can also find it there. But what I suggest to all listeners is to call up your local Catholic bookstore and ask them to order the book. It's always best to support your local outlets of the media distribution rather than maybe Big Brother Amazon. Yeah. It's one of the best ways to get out there, but let's support the little guys too.
Yeah, absolutely. So Shaun, thank you so much for your time. I would love to have a part 2 anytime with you, because I think this is so important. Sometimes we spend so much time trying to understand the doctrine and the teaching of the church, but we don't always spend as much time on those evangelization efforts. So that's why I think your work is needed and appreciated. So thank you for the time.
My pleasure, Pat. Thank you very much.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.